The transport shuttle's engines screamed as it descended through the blood-red atmosphere of Or, the gladiatorial capital of the Empire. Inside the cramped cargo hold, Captain Sarah pressed her back against the cold metal wall, her hair matted with dried blood from the capture that had brought her here. The chains around her wrists were real enough, but the fear in her blue eyes was carefully crafted theater. 3 days ago, she had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human military history. They had been raiding human colonies for months, taking prisoners to feed their sick entertainment industry. Intel suggested they were planning something bigger, a full-scale invasion that would wipe humanity from the galaxy. The only way to gather intelligence was from the inside, from the very heart of their gladiatorial complex. The shuttle lurched as it touched down, and Sarah heard the heavy footsteps of her captors approaching. The door hissed open, revealing 2 towering guards. They stood nearly 9 feet tall, their reptilian skin a mottled green-brown with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws. Their yellow eyes held nothing but contempt as they looked down at her. "Move, human filth," one of them hissed in broken English, hauling her to her feet with unnecessary force. Sarah stumbled, playing the part of a terrified prisoner perfectly. In reality, she was cataloging everything: the layout of the landing bay, the number of guards, the positions of security cameras, the weak points in the facility's design. The arena complex was massive, a sprawling structure that could have housed a small city. Its black stone walls stretched high into the crimson sky, decorated with the skulls of 1,000 different species. Sarah counted at least 50 different entry points as they dragged her through the main corridor, each one potentially useful for her eventual escape. Other prisoners lined the hallways, all from different worlds conquered by the Empire. She saw the blue-skinned, their gill slits fluttering in distress. The rock-like granite sat motionless, their mineral-based bodies showing signs of recent battle damage. A group of clicked their mandibles in what she recognized as a death song. But it was the humans that made her heart clench. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all captured from the outer colonies. Men, women, even some teenagers who couldn't have been older than 16. Their eyes held the hollow look of people who had given up hope. Sarah forced herself to look away, focusing on her mission. She would save them all, but first she had to survive long enough to gather the intelligence Earth needed. The guards shoved her into a processing chamber where a bored-looking clerk sat behind a desk made from what appeared to be polished bone. His 4 hands moved across a holographic interface as he cataloged her arrival. Species human, gender female, estimated survival time in arena. He paused, looking her up and down with those cold, yellow eyes. 30 seconds against a worm, maybe 45 if she's lucky. "Actually," came a smooth voice from the shadows, "I think we can do better than that." Sarah's blood ran cold as a figure stepped into the light. This was different from the others she had seen. Where the guards were brutish and crude, this one moved with predatory grace. His scales were a deeper green, almost black, and intricate scars covered his arms like ritual tattoos. But it was his eyes that made her skin crawl. They held an intelligence that the others lacked, and something else: hunger. "Lord," the clerk stammered, immediately prostrating himself, "I didn't know you were interested in this batch." "Oh, but I am," said, circling Sarah like a shark. "You see, this one is different. Look at her muscle definition, the way she holds herself even in chains. This isn't some soft colonist or merchant. This one has training." Sarah kept her face carefully neutral, but inside she was cursing. This was too observant, too intelligent. She had spent months preparing for this mission, learning to suppress her natural combat reflexes, but apparently it hadn't been enough. "What are you suggesting, my lord?" the clerk asked. The Reaper said simply. The entire room went silent. Even the guards took a step back. Sarah had heard whispers of the Reaper during her intelligence briefings, but the information had been sketchy. Some kind of ultimate predator that they kept for special occasions. "My lord," the clerk whispered, "the Reaper hasn't been fed in 6 months. It's hungry and angry. Even our best gladiators don't last more than minutes against it." "Exactly," smiled, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Which will make it all the more entertaining when this pretty little human gets torn apart. Schedule it for tomorrow night's main event. I want every camera focused on her face when the Reaper takes her apart piece by piece." As the guards dragged her away to the holding cells, Sarah's mind was racing. She had expected to face dangerous creatures in the arena, but the Reaper sounded like something beyond normal combat parameters. Still, she had trained for years for exactly this kind of situation. The question was whether she could maintain her cover long enough to complete the mission. The holding cells were a nightmare of suffering. Hundreds of beings from across the galaxy were crammed into spaces barely large enough for them to lie down. The air was thick with the stench of fear, blood, and worse things. Sarah was thrown into a cell with 3 other humans, all of them looking at her with a mixture of pity and curiosity. "New meat," one of them said bitterly. He was a middle-aged man with the weathered look of a colony farmer. "I'm been here 2 weeks. You're the 5th human they've put in here, the other 4. He gestured to some dark stains on the cell floor. "I'm Jennifer," said a younger woman with short red hair. She had the lean build of a starship engineer. 3 days for me. They threw me against some kind of acid-spitting lizard thing, got lucky and found a weak spot." She showed Sarah a crude bandage wrapped around her arm where the acid had eaten through her clothes and skin. The 3rd prisoner was barely more than a boy, maybe 19 years old. "Tommy," he whispered. "Colony Defense Force, wasn't very good at defending, apparently." His nervous laugh held an edge of hysteria. "Sarah," she replied, keeping her voice steady, "what do you know about something called the Reaper?" The reaction was immediate. All 3 of her cellmates pressed themselves against the far wall, their faces going white with terror. "Jesus Christ," breathed. "They're putting you against the Reaper. Why would they? I mean, what did you do?" "Nothing," Sarah said honestly. "Just caught someone's attention, apparently." "The Reaper," Jennifer whispered, "is the arena's ultimate executioner. Nobody knows exactly what it is. Some say it's a bioweapon left over from the last Great War. Others think it's some kind of demon that the summoned from another dimension. What I do know is that it's never lost a fight. Ever." "How many gladiators has it faced?" Sarah asked. "Hundreds," Tommy said, his voice shaking. "Maybe thousands, champions from every world in the Empire. The longest anyone ever lasted against it was 7 minutes, and that was a berserker who was literally too angry to die quickly." Sarah absorbed this information, her tactical mind already working on potential strategies. "What about weapons? Do they give you anything to fight with?" Laughed bitterly. "For the Reaper, they'll probably give you a butter knife and wish you luck. The whole point isn't for you to win, it's for you to die in the most entertaining way possible." As night fell over the arena complex, Sarah lay on the cold floor and stared up at the ceiling. Through the bars of her cell, she could see guard patrols moving in predictable patterns. The facility's security was designed to keep prisoners in, not to repel a military assault. She filed away this information for later use. Around midnight, she heard footsteps approaching. 3 guards stopped outside her cell, their yellow eyes gleaming in the darkness. "Human female," one of them hissed. "Lord wishes to see you." Sarah was hauled from the cell and marched through dimly lit corridors to what appeared to be private chambers. The room was decorated in typical fashion trophies from defeated enemies, weapons from 100 different worlds, and what looked like preserved body parts floating in glass cases. Sat behind a massive desk, his 4 hands steepled as he watched her enter. "Ah, my star attraction, I trust your accommodations are adequate." "Charming," Sarah replied dryly, earning a backhand from one of the guards that sent her sprawling. Said, but his tone held amusement rather than disapproval. "Such spirit. It's been so long since we had a human with any fight left in them. The last batch was pathetically weak." He stood and walked around the desk, his movements fluid and predatory. "Tell me, what's your name?" "Sarah," she replied, seeing no point in lying about something so basic. "Sarah," he repeated, tasting the word. "A pretty name for a pretty human. It's almost a shame that you'll be dead this time tomorrow." "Almost?" Sarah asked. "Oh, but the entertainment value will be exquisite. You see, the Reaper has been without fresh meat for months. It's restless, hungry. When it finally gets its claws on you, well, let's just say the crowd will get quite a show." He gestured to one of the guards. "Bring the recording device." Sarah was forced to her knees as a guard set up what looked like a sophisticated camera system. The red recording light blinked on and moved into frame beside her. "Citizens of the Empire," he began, his voice taking on the practiced cadence of a showman. "Tomorrow night, you will witness the ultimate test of human weakness against superiority. This pathetic creature, this supposed representative of humanity's finest, will face our glorious Reaper in single combat." He grabbed Sarah's chin, forcing her to look into the camera. "Look at her, citizens. See the fear in her eyes. Tomorrow, that fear will turn to agony, and that agony will turn to blessed death. Let this be a message to any humans who think they can resist the might of our empire. This is what awaits all who oppose us. The camera clicked off and released her chin. That little recording will be broadcast to every human world within our territory. Let them see what happens to their heroes. As Sarah was dragged back to her cell, her mind was racing. The broadcast was actually perfect for her needs. Once she revealed her true capabilities against the Reaper, the recording would serve as a declaration of war, a message that humanity was not as weak as the believed. Back in the cell, her three companions were waiting with obvious anxiety. "What did they want?" Jennifer asked. "Just some pre-fight entertainment," Sarah replied, settling back down on the floor. "Listen," said urgently. "I know this is going to sound crazy, but there might be a way to survive the Reaper." "I'm listening," Sarah said. "There's a prisoner in cell block 7, a named. He was the one who lasted 7 minutes against the thing. He might know something that could help you." "How do I get to cell block 7? "You don't," Tommy said flatly. "It's on the other side of the complex, through 3 security checkpoints and past the guard barracks." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then stood and walked to the cell door. "Guard," she called out. A guard ambled over, looking annoyed. "What do you want, meat?" "I need to speak with someone, a named." The guard laughed. "And why would we allow such a thing?" "Because," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "if I die too quickly tomorrow night, your audience is going to be very disappointed. Lord wants a show. I can give him one, but only if I know what I'm facing." The guard considered this, his yellow eyes narrowing. After a moment, he turned and walked away. Sarah settled back down to wait, hoping her gambit would work. An hour later, the guard returned with 2 companions. "You have 5 minutes," he growled, unlocking the cell door. Sarah was led through the complex, past dozens of other cells filled with the Empire's victims. Cell Block 7 housed the arena's veteran survivors gladiators who had won enough fights to earn slightly better accommodations and the slim hope of eventual freedom. Cell was at the end of the block. There was exactly what Sarah had expected: 8 feet of solid muscle, his red skin covered in ritual scars and tattoos that marked his victories in the arena. His forearms were as thick as tree trunks, ending in hands that could crush steel. But it was his eyes that surprised her. Instead of the fury she expected, she saw intelligence and something that might have been compassion. "So," he rumbled in accented English, "you are the human who faces the Reaper tomorrow." "I am," Sarah replied. "I was told you survived longer against it than anyone." His laugh was bitter. "Survive? Child, I didn't survive anything. The Reaper let me live long enough to provide entertainment. When it grew bored, it ended the fight." "What is it?" Sarah asked urgently. "What am I going to face?" There was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant with memory. "The Reaper is not a single creature," he said finally. "It is many creatures fused together by biotechnology, parts of predators from 100 different worlds, all combined into one perfect killing machine." Sarah felt her blood run cold. Genetic chimeras were theoretical constructs in human science, too unstable and dangerous to actually create, if they had mastered the technology. "It has the speed of a," continued, "the armor of a granite drake, the poison of a nexus viper, and the intelligence of a Terran apex predator." "Terran," Sarah interrupted. "You mean Earth predators." "Indeed, they use genetic samples from your world's greatest hunters. The cunning of your human ancestors, the strength of your great apes, the killing instincts of your large cats. All fused with alien predators to create something that understands how to hunt any prey it faces." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. The Reaper wasn't just a monster. It was specifically designed to hunt and kill humans and anything else that stood against the Empire. "How do you kill something like that?" she asked. "You don't," said simply. "But if you must try, remember this: it has one weakness. The fusion process requires constant energy to maintain. All those different biological systems fighting each other, trying to reject the foreign tissue. It needs to feed constantly to maintain its cohesion. So it gets weaker over time. If it doesn't feed, yes, but in the arena it feeds on its victims. The longer the fight goes, the stronger it becomes." Sarah absorbed this information, her tactical mind already working on strategies. "Anything else?" "Yes," said quietly. "Die with honor. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you beg." As the guards led her back to her cell, Sarah's mind was racing. The Reaper was worse than anything she had imagined, but she was beginning to see possibilities. The creature's greatest strength, its fusion of different predator types, might also be its greatest weakness. Back in her cell, Jennifer and Tommy were waiting anxiously. "Well," Jennifer asked. "It's bad," Sarah admitted. "Worse than we thought, but not impossible." She spent the rest of the night sharing what she had learned, carefully editing out certain details. She told them about the genetic fusion, about the creature's need to feed, about its various abilities. What she didn't tell them was that she was beginning to formulate a plan that might not only help her survive the encounter, but also give her the intelligence she needed to complete her mission. As dawn broke over the arena complex, Sarah could hear the sounds of preparation beginning. Vendors setting up stalls, guards changing shifts, and somewhere in the distance, a sound that made her blood freeze, a roar that seemed to combine the voices of a dozen different predators into one terrifying symphony. The Reaper was awake, and it was hungry. The day passed in a blur of routine brutality. Other prisoners were taken for their own matches, some returning bloody but alive, others not returning at all. Sarah used the time to stretch, to prepare her body for what was coming, and to review everything she knew about close-quarters combat against superior opponents. As evening approached, the guards came for her. They fitted her with simple cloth garments designed to tear easily and provide minimal protection. The crowd wanted to see skin when the Reaper went to work. "Any last requests?" one of the guards asked mockingly. "Yeah," Sarah replied. "When this is over, remember that you underestimated us." The guard laughed as they led her through the tunnels toward the arena floor. But something in her voice, something in her eyes, made him glance back at her with the first hint of uncertainty she had seen from any. The arena was packed. 50,000 beings from across the Empire had come to see humanity's champion die. The noise was deafening roars, clicks, hisses, and other sounds from species she couldn't identify. But when she stepped out onto the blood-soaked sand, a hush fell over the crowd. Lord's voice boomed across the arena through hidden speakers. "Citizens of the Empire, behold your entertainment for tonight. One pathetic human female against our glorious Reaper. Let this be a lesson to any who would resist our might." Sarah walked to the center of the arena, where a small table held what passed for weapons. As it predicted, her options were pathetic: a dull knife, a broken spear tip, and what looked like a metal rod that might once have been part of a fence. She selected the knife and the rod, testing their weight and balance. Neither would be much use against an apex predator, but they were better than fighting with bare hands. A gate opened on the far side of the arena, and the Reaper emerged. Sarah's first thought was that no amount of description could have prepared her for the reality. The creature stood 12 feet tall, its body a nightmarish fusion of organic and mechanical components. She could see elements of dozens of different predators, the striped hide of a great cat stretched over the armored segments of some kind of carapace. Its head was a horrific merger of reptilian features with what looked disturbingly like human cranial structure. 6 limbs extended from its torso, 4 arms ending in different types of claws, and 2 legs that seemed designed for both speed and crushing power. But it was the eyes that truly terrified her. They held an intelligence that was almost human, but twisted into something utterly alien and hostile. This wasn't just a predator. It was a thinking killer that understood exactly what it was doing. The Reaper moved with impossible grace for something its size, circling her slowly as it analyzed her capabilities. Sarah forced herself to remain still, to project the image of a terrified prisoner rather than a trained operative. The crowd began to chant something in the language, and she could see credits changing hands as beings placed bets on how long she would last. The Reaper completed its circle and stopped about 20 feet away. For a moment, predator and prey simply stared at each other across the blood-soaked sand. Then it attacked. Sarah's enhanced reflexes, the product of years of military conditioning and genetic optimization, kicked in as the creature launched itself toward her with impossible speed. She dove to the side, rolling across the sand as razor-sharp claws whistled through the air where her head had been seconds before. The crowd gasped. That was the first sign that this might not go according to script. The Reaper spun with liquid grace, its multiple arms reaching for her even as she moved. Sarah twisted away from one set of claws, only to feel another set rake across her back, shredding her garment and drawing first blood. She came up in a combat crouch, the knife held in a reverse grip, the metal rod extended like a short staff. For the first time, she allowed her true nature to show in her stance and movement. The Reaper paused, its head tilting as it reassessed the threat before it. Something had changed in its prey, something that triggered responses buried deep in its genetically modified brain. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since her capture, it wasn't an act. "Come on then," she whispered. "Let's dance." The Reaper's second attack came faster than the first, but Sarah was ready. Years of training against multiple opponents had taught her to track movement patterns, and despite its alien nature, the creature still followed certain predictable principles. She flowed around its strike like water, the knife flicking out to score a shallow cut across what looked like a nerve cluster on its forearm. The creature's roar of pain and fury echoed across the arena, and the crowd fell silent. In 50 years of gladiatorial combat, no one had ever drawn first blood on the Reaper. Sarah didn't give it time to recover. She pressed her attack, using her smaller size and superior speed to stay inside the creature's reach, where its massive limbs became a disadvantage. The metal rod became an extension of her arm, striking at joints and nerve clusters with surgical precision. But the Reaper was learning. Its genetically enhanced intelligence began to adapt to her fighting style, its movements becoming more controlled, more defensive. One massive claw caught her across the ribs, sending her flying across the arena floor to crash against the wall. Sarah rolled to her feet, tasting blood. Through the ringing in her ears, she could hear the crowd erupting. Whatever they had expected to see tonight, this wasn't it. Lord's voice cut through the noise, broadcast across the arena with barely controlled fury. "What trickery is this? This human fights like a trained warrior." Sarah wiped blood from her mouth and grinned up at the VIP section where she could see the Lord watching with obvious agitation. "Surprise!" she called out, her voice carrying across the sand. The Reaper was circling her again, but its approach was different now. It moved with the respect one predator shows another, acknowledging that its prey had teeth. Sarah used the breathing space to assess her situation. The cuts on her back and ribs were painful but not debilitating. Her weapons were intact, and more importantly, she was beginning to understand the creature's attack patterns. The Reaper had 6 limbs to her 4, but that actually worked against it in close combat. The neurological overhead required to coordinate that many appendages created tiny hesitations, microsecond delays that a trained fighter could exploit. More importantly, she was beginning to see the stress fractures in its genetic structure. Where different predator types had been fused together, there were subtle inconsistencies in movement, places where conflicting instincts created vulnerabilities. The creature lunged again, all 4 arms striking in a complex pattern designed to leave her nowhere to dodge. Instead of trying to escape, Sarah moved forward inside the strike pattern. Her knife found the gap between its chitinous armor plates, sliding deep between what felt like ribs. The Reaper's scream this time was different, higher-pitched, almost anguished. Sarah twisted the blade and felt something vital give way. But the creature's response was immediate and devastating. Its powerful legs kicked out, catching her in the stomach and launching her across the arena. She hit the sand hard, rolling to absorb the impact, but the knife was torn from her grip. Sarah came up gasping, one hand pressed to her stomach where she could feel the beginning of what would be spectacular bruises. The Reaper was wounded now, green ichor dripping from between its armor plates, but it was far from finished. If anything, the injury seemed to have awakened something even more dangerous in the creature. Its movements became more fluid, more coordinated. The conflicting genetic patterns that had created small vulnerabilities were being by pure predatory instinct. Sarah still had the metal rod, but against a creature this size and this angry, it felt pathetically inadequate. She needed a new strategy, something that would use the creature's own nature against it. That's when she remembered what had told her about the Reaper's feeding habits. The genetic fusion required constant energy to maintain. The creature needed to consume biomass from its victims to power its various biological systems. An idea began to form, dangerous and desperate, but possibly their only chance. The Reaper charged again, and this time Sarah didn't try to dodge. Instead, she dropped to the sand and rolled between its legs, coming up behind it. The metal rod lanced out toward what she hoped was a kidney analog, but the creature spun faster than should have been possible, backhanding her across the arena. This time she didn't get up quite so quickly. The world was spinning and she could taste more blood. Concussion, probably, but she couldn't afford to show weakness now. The crowd was on its feet, their earlier bloodlust replaced by something approaching respect. They had come to see an execution, but they were witnessing a battle between two apex predators. Sarah forced herself upright, using the rod as a crutch. The Reaper was stalking toward her, taking its time now. It knew she was weakening, and it was savoring the moment. "Is that all?" Sarah called out, her voice carrying across the arena. "I've fought house cats that were more dangerous." The insult had the desired effect. The creature's eyes blazed with fury, and it abandoned its cautious approach for another direct assault. Sarah waited until the last possible moment, then dove to the side. But instead of trying to attack, she grabbed something from the sand, a piece of debris from an earlier fight, sharp-edged and about the size of her fist. The Reaper's momentum carried it past her, and she used the opportunity to do something that went against every combat instinct she had. She cut herself. The improvised blade opened a gash along her forearm, and bright red human blood began to flow onto the sand. The Reaper's nostrils flared, and its entire body language changed. The scent of fresh blood triggered something deep in its predatory programming. Sarah began to move in a wide circle, letting the blood drip, creating a trail. The creature followed, its attention focused entirely on the promise of feeding. Its movements became less controlled, more instinctual. She was betting everything on her understanding of the creature's biology. If was right, if the genetic fusion really did require constant feeding to maintain stability, then the Reaper's hunger would override its tactical intelligence. The gambit worked. The creature's attack became more frenzied, less coordinated. It was no longer fighting a thinking opponent, it was hunting wounded prey. Sarah led it in another circle, then suddenly reversed direction. The Reaper, caught off guard by the change, stumbled slightly as it tried to adjust its trajectory. It was the opening she had been waiting for. Sarah launched herself at the creature's wounded side, driving the metal rod deep into the gap her knife had created earlier. This time she didn't try to withdraw the weapon. Instead, she used it as a lever, throwing her entire body weight behind it. The rod punched through whatever internal organs the creature kept in that area. The Reaper's roar of pain and fury shook dust from the arena walls, but Sarah wasn't finished. Using the embedded rod as an anchor point, she hauled herself up onto the creature's back. Her goal was the base of its neck, where she could see neural junction points glowing beneath translucent skin. The Reaper bucked and spun, trying to dislodge her, but Sarah's enhanced grip strength and years of close-quarters combat training kept her in place. Her fingers found the neural clusters and began to squeeze. The effect was immediate. The creature's movements became erratic, uncontrolled. Whatever biotechnological systems regulated its various genetic components were being disrupted. But the Reaper had one final trick. Instead of trying to throw her off, it threw itself backward, attempting to crush her against the arena wall. Sarah saw the wall approaching and made a desperate choice. She released her grip on the creature's neck and pushed herself away, using the Reaper's own momentum to launch herself clear. She hit the sand hard, rolled, and came up just in time to see the Reaper slam into the wall with tremendous force. Cracks appeared in the ancient stone, and several armor plates on the creature's back shattered from the impact. Both fighters faced each other across the blood-stained arena, both wounded, both exhausted. Sarah's arm was still bleeding freely, and she could feel her strength ebbing. The Reaper was favoring its left side where the rod still protruded, and its movements had become noticeably slower. The crowd was absolutely silent. This had gone far beyond entertainment into something approaching a mythic battle. Lord's voice echoed across the arena, no longer smooth and controlled, but edged with something that might have been panic. "Finish her! What are you waiting for?" The Reaper's response was a roar of pure defiance that seemed directed as much at its masters as at Sarah. For a moment, she saw something almost like recognition in its eyes, one warrior acknowledging another. Then the moment passed, and it charged one final time. Sarah was too exhausted to dodge, too weak to run. Instead, she did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She charged back. They met in the center of the arena with a collision that shook the ground. Sarah's remaining strength went into one final attack, driving her makeshift blade toward what she hoped was the creature's heart. The Reaper's claws found her at the same moment, raking across her chest and shoulder. Pain exploded through her nervous system, but she held on, driving the blade deeper. For a moment they stood locked together, predator and prey, each delivering what should have been a killing blow. Then the Reaper staggered backward, green ichor pumping from its chest. Its legs gave way, and the massive creature crashed to the sand. Sarah remained standing for another heartbeat, looking down at her fallen opponent. Then the arena began to spin, her legs folded beneath her, and darkness claimed her. She woke to the sound of arguing voices speaking in the language. Sarah kept her eyes closed and her breathing steady, using the time to assess her situation. She was lying on something soft, a medical bed, maybe. Various tubes and wires were attached to her arms, presumably monitoring her vital signs and delivering nutrients or medications. The wounds on her chest and shoulder had been cleaned and bandaged with professional skill. Gradually, the voices resolved into words she could understand as the speakers switched to English. Unprecedented. In 500 years of arena combat, nothing like this has ever happened. The crowd is calling her the human demon. They're demanding to see more fights. More fights? She nearly died killing the Reaper. What could we possibly match her against? That's not the point. Don't you understand what this means? We've been treating humans as weak, pathetic creatures barely worth enslaving. But if one of their females can kill our ultimate predator... Sarah recognized the voice lord, but he sounded different now. Worried, maybe even afraid. What are you suggesting, my lord? I'm suggesting that we may have gravely underestimated the human species. This female fought with skills that our intelligence reports never mentioned. Where did she learn such techniques? Perhaps she was military. No ordinary military training produces warriors capable of what we witnessed. This level of enhancement, this degree of skill, it suggests capabilities far beyond what we believed humans possessed. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Her mission was working better than she had dared hope. They were beginning to question their assumptions about humanity. What do we do with her? Keep her alive, obviously. We need to learn everything we can about her training, her enhancements, her capabilities, if there are more like her. You think Earth might have an army of such warriors? There was a long pause before responded. I think we need to find out, and I think our invasion plans may need to be reconsidered. Sarah heard footsteps approaching her bed, and she quickly adjusted her breathing to simulate unconsciousness. She's still sedated, came the voice of what sounded like a medical technician. Her injuries are healing remarkably quickly, much faster than normal human physiology should allow. More evidence of enhancement, mused. What kind of civilization can produce warriors like this, and more importantly, how many of them are there? Sarah felt something touch her forehead, probably a medical scanner of some kind. She forced herself to remain limp and unresponsive. Brain activity shows normal unconscious patterns, the technician reported. But there are some unusual neural pathways, enhanced reflexes, improved processing speed, memory optimization techniques. Whoever modified this human knew what they were doing. Actually, Sarah reflected, most of her enhancements were the result of intensive training rather than genetic modification, but she wasn't about to correct their assumptions. Let them think humans had access to advanced biotech. How long before she wakes up? Hard to say. Her metabolism is processing the sedatives faster than expected. Could be hours, could be days. Post a guard. When she wakes, I want to be immediately. Footsteps retreated, and Sarah was left alone with her thoughts. The mission was proceeding better than expected. She had not only survived the arena, but had genuinely shaken the confidence in their superiority. The question now was how to leverage that advantage. She needed intelligence about their invasion plans, their military capabilities, their weaknesses, and she needed to find a way to get that information back to Earth. Hours passed in a blur of feigned unconsciousness and careful eavesdropping. She learned that the arena complex was just one part of a much larger military installation. They had assembled a fleet capable of conquering entire star systems, and Earth was high on their target list. But her victory against the Reaper had introduced an element of uncertainty into their planning. She heard multiple conversations about reassessing human military capabilities, about the possibility that Earth might be more dangerous than anticipated. When Sarah finally allowed herself to wake up, it was to find Lord sitting beside her bed. His 4 hands, folded in what she had learned, was a gesture of contemplation among his species. "Ah," he said as her eyes fluttered open, "the hero awakens." "Hero," Sarah's voice came out as a croak. "I thought I was just entertainment." "Oh, you were far more than that," replied. "You have given us much to think about." Sarah struggled to sit up, wincing as her injuries protested. Such as? Such as how a simple colonial prisoner came to possess the skills necessary to kill our greatest predator. Such as what other surprises the human species might have in store for us. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Maybe you should have thought of that before you started raiding our colonies." "Indeed," said softly, "perhaps we should have." He stood and began packing around her bed. "Tell me about Earth's military capabilities." "Why should I tell you anything?" "Because, my dear Sarah, the alternative is a return to the arena. And next time, I won't be so generous with the medical care." Sarah pretended to consider this threat, though in reality she was calculating distances and potential weapons. The medical equipment around her bed could be improvised into several different types of offensive tools. "Earth's military is adequate," she said finally. "We can defend ourselves." "Can you, against a fleet of 5,000 warships? Against armies numbering in the millions?" Sarah felt her blood run cold, but she kept her expression neutral. 5,000 ships was far larger than Earth's intelligence estimates had suggested. "You seem surprised," observed. "Did your superiors not brief you on the scope of our forces?" "What superiors?" Sarah asked, still playing the part of a captured colonist. "Laughed, please. Your performance in the arena revealed training that goes far beyond anything available to civilian populations. You are military, probably special forces. The question is whether you're reconnaissance or something more targeted." Sarah remained silent, which seemed to confirm his suspicions. "A spy, then? How wonderfully dramatic. I assume you were sent to gather intelligence on our operations here." "I was sent to die in your arena for the entertainment of monsters," Sarah replied. "Were you, or were you sent to survive long enough to learn about our invasion plans?" Stopped packing and fixed her with those cold, yellow eyes. "Because if that was your mission, I'm afraid you've learned far more than your superiors intended." He gestured toward a wall display that activated at his command, showing what appeared to be tactical information about fleet dispositions and invasion timelines. "Earth has 6 months," he said casually. 6 months before our grand fleet arrives to claim your world for the Empire. Your little demonstration in the arena has been educational, but it changes nothing. One enhanced warrior does not make a military force." Sarah studied the information on the display, memorizing everything she could see. Fleet numbers, ship classifications, staging areas, supply lines. It was exactly the kind of intelligence Earth needed to mount a defense. "Of course," continued, "there is another possibility." "Which is?" "That you were sent here not just to gather intelligence, but to send a message, to demonstrate human capabilities in a way that would make us reconsider our plans." Sarah's heart rate spiked, but she kept her expression neutral. How could he have guessed her secondary objective so accurately? "If that was the plan," he said softly, "then I'm afraid it has backfired spectacularly. Yes, you've proven that humans can be dangerous opponents, but you've also revealed capabilities that we must now account for in our invasion planning." He touched a control on the display, and the tactical information was replaced by what looked like analysis reports and weapon specifications. "We are already developing countermeasures," he explained. "Weapons specifically designed to neutralize enhanced human warriors, tactics adapted to account for your species' apparent advantages in close combat, biological agents tailored to human genetics." The blood drained from Sarah's face. By revealing her capabilities, had she inadvertently given them the information they needed to defeat humanity more effectively? "I can see that thought hadn't occurred to you," observed with satisfaction. "How deliciously ironic. Your mission to demonstrate human strength may have sealed your species' fate." Sarah forced herself to think past the implications of his words. There had to be something she could do, some way to turn this situation to humanity's advantage. "Unless," said, almost as if reading her thoughts, "you would care to discuss terms for your planet's surrender." "Surrender?" "A negotiated occupation. Your world would become part of the Empire, but your people would be treated as valued subjects rather than conquered slaves. Given your demonstrated capabilities, such an arrangement might be mutually beneficial. Sarah stared at him, understanding finally dawning. You're afraid. Excuse me. You're afraid that if you invade Earth, it's going to cost you more than you want to pay. So you're trying to get me to negotiate a surrender. His expression hardened. I fear nothing from your pathetic species. Then why are you offering terms instead of just invading? You said yourself you have 5,000 ships. If humans are so pathetic, why not just take what you want? The silence stretched between them, and Sarah knew she had struck a nerve. One warrior, she continued, pressing her advantage. One supposedly weak human female killed your ultimate predator. What do you think a million human soldiers could do? What do you think our fleet could accomplish if we're given time to prepare? Your fleet laughed, but it sounded forced. Intelligence reports suggest Earth has perhaps 100 warships. Intelligence reports can be wrong, Sarah said quietly. Just like your intelligence about human capabilities was wrong. She could see doubt creeping into his eyes. Good. Let him wonder what else his spies might have missed. It doesn't matter, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. 6 months, that's all the time your world has left. As he turned to leave, Sarah called out one final challenge. 6 months is a long time, long enough for Earth to prepare, long enough for reinforcements to arrive, long enough for your enemies to learn about your invasion plans and decide they'd rather not have the Empire controlling another star system. Paused at the door, reinforcements. Did you really think humanity was alone in this galaxy? Did you think we hadn't made allies, formed alliances, negotiated mutual defense treaties? It was a bluff, but based on his reaction, it was an effective one. The Empire had conquered dozens of worlds, and the idea that their victims might have banded together was clearly something that hadn't occurred to them. You're lying, he said, but his voice held uncertainty. Am I? I guess you'll find out in 6 months. After he left, Sarah lay back in the medical bed and allowed herself a small smile. The mission was far from over, but she had accomplished more than she had dared hope. She had intelligence about the invasion, she had shaken the confidence, and she had planted seeds of doubt about Earth's true capabilities. Now she just had to find a way to get that information home. And perhaps, if she was very lucky and very clever, she might be able to do more than that. After all, she was inside the enemy's most secure facility, with access to their command structure and their darkest secrets. The question was whether she could exploit that access before they realized just how dangerous she really was. Outside her room, she could hear guards talking in low voices. The arena had made her famous throughout the complex, but fame was a double-edged sword. Everyone would be watching her now, waiting to see what the human demon would do next. Sarah closed her eyes and began to plan. 6 months until the invasion. 6 months to find a way to turn the hunters into the hunted. 6 months to show the Empire that they had made a terrible mistake in underestimating humanity. 3 weeks passed before Sarah made her first real move. 3 weeks of careful observation, of building relationships with guards and medical staff, of mapping the facility's security protocols and identifying weaknesses. She appeared to be a broken warrior slowly recovering from her ordeal in the arena. In reality, she was a coiled spring waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The opportunity came during a routine medical examination. Doctor, the facility's chief medical officer, had become fascinated by her enhanced physiology and conducted daily tests to understand how human bioengineering worked. He was brilliant but arrogant, convinced that his scientific curiosity was safely contained within the medical bay's security measures. He was wrong. Sarah had been studying the medical equipment for weeks, learning its functions and capabilities. The neural scanner that Doctor used to map her brain patterns could, with minor modifications, become a powerful transmission device. The genetic analyzer contained quantum processors that could crack most encryption systems given enough time. Most importantly, the medical bay's computer systems were connected to the facility's main network, a necessity for updating patient records and ordering supplies, but also a potential pathway into the command structure. As Doctor began his daily examination, Sarah made her move. Doctor, she said weakly, I've been having strange dreams, memories that don't seem to belong to me. His eyes lit up with scientific interest. Fascinating. This could be a side effect of the neural trauma from your arena battle. Can you describe these memories? Sarah fabricated a story about experiencing memories from other species, claiming that her enhanced brain was somehow picking up psychic impressions from the Reaper's victims. It was complete nonsense, but it fed into Doctor's ego and his desire to make a groundbreaking discovery. "We must study this phenomenon immediately," he declared, activating additional scanning equipment. "This could be evidence of quantum entanglement at the cellular level." As the sophisticated sensors focused on her brain, Sarah used techniques learned during her intelligence training to create specific neural patterns. To Doctor, it looked like she was experiencing alien memories. In reality, she was creating a feedback loop in the scanning equipment that would mask her true activities. While the Doctor was distracted by his readings, Sarah's enhanced nervous system interfaced with the scanner's quantum processors. Years of training in cyber warfare had taught her to think like a computer, to process information in ways that could fool electronic security systems. She began her infiltration of the facility's network with surgical precision. Personnel files, security protocols, communication logs, everything flowed through her consciousness as she navigated the digital infrastructure that kept the operation functioning. What she found exceeded her worst fears. The invasion fleet wasn't just targeting Earth. It was the first wave of a coordinated assault against every inhabited system within a 50-light-year radius. They called it the Final Expansion, a campaign designed to bring the entire local galactic sector under their control. Earth was just the beginning. The fleet composition was even larger than had claimed. 7,000 warships supported by countless transport vessels, orbital bombardment platforms, and biological warfare deployment systems. It was enough firepower to sterilize entire worlds. But as Sarah dug deeper into their operational plans, she began to see weaknesses. The Empire was vast but fragmented, held together more by fear than loyalty. Many of their client species were looking for opportunities to rebel. The logistics of maintaining such a massive fleet were straining their resources to the breaking point. Most importantly, their command structure was rigidly hierarchical and dependent on a centralized communication system. If that system could be disrupted. Sarah filed away this information and continued her digital exploration. She needed to find a way to get intelligence back to Earth, but she also needed to look for opportunities to sabotage the invasion from within. "Remarkable," Doctor murmured, studying his scanner readings. "The neural patterns you're displaying are unlike anything in our databases. This could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness itself." "Doctor," Sarah said, allowing genuine exhaustion to creep into her voice, "these memories, they're showing me things, terrible things that the Empire has done to other worlds." "What kind of things?" he asked, his scientific interest overriding any security concerns. Sarah began describing atrocities that she was actually reading from the facility's own files: genocide campaigns, slave raids, the complete destruction of civilizations that refused to submit. She presented them as alien memories bleeding through from the Reaper's victims, but every detail was carefully chosen from the Empire's actual records. Doctor's reaction was unexpected. As she described the systematic extermination of she saw something flicker across his reptilian features. Not pride or satisfaction, but something that looked almost like guilt. "You describe these events with great detail," he said quietly. "The memories are very vivid," Sarah replied, watching his reaction carefully. "It's as if I was there when it happened." "The campaign was classified," Doctor said, his voice barely above a whisper. "How could you possibly?" He trailed off, staring at the scanner readings with new understanding. Sarah had given him an explanation that made scientific sense while revealing knowledge she shouldn't possess. The cognitive dissonance was eating at him. "Doctor," she said gently, "in these memories I can see the faces of the victims. Children mostly, children who never had a chance to grow up." Doctor's 4 hands trembled as he shut off the scanner. "Enough, the session is over." But as he moved to leave, Sarah played her final card. "Doctor, in one of the memories, I saw a young medic trying to save some of the children. He was court-martialed for insubordination." The effect was immediate. Doctor froze, his yellow eyes wide with shock and fear. "That's impossible," he whispered. "No one else was there, no one else knew about." "About your attempt to treat civilians instead of leaving them to die," Sarah finished. About how you tried to establish a field hospital until your commanding officer threatened you with execution. Doctor collapsed into a chair, his usual arrogance replaced by naked vulnerability. How do you know this? These aren't memories from the Reaper. This is classified information that someone with access to medical records might have discovered, Sarah said softly. Information that suggests not everyone in the Empire is happy with the direction it's taken. They stared at each other across the medical bay, predator and prey, but Sarah was no longer sure which was which. What do you want? Doctor asked finally. To stop this from happening again, Sarah replied honestly. To prevent Earth from suffering the same fate as Altair. You can't stop the Empire, no one can. Maybe, but individuals can make choices. They can decide whether to be part of the machine that crushes worlds, or part of the resistance that fights back. Doctor was quiet for a long moment, staring at his four hands as if seeing them for the first time. If I help you, he said slowly, they'll kill me. If you don't help me, how many more worlds will burn? How many more children will die while you stand by and do nothing? It was a calculated risk, but Sarah's psychological profile of the doctor suggested he was motivated more by guilt and compassion than by loyalty to the Empire. Her gamble paid off. What do you need? He asked. Access to the communication array. I need to send a message to Earth. Impossible. The communication systems are under constant surveillance. Not the main arrays, Sarah agreed. But the medical bay has its own emergency beacon for requesting priority medical supplies, with some modifications. Doctor's eyes widened as he understood what she was proposing. That would be treason. Yes, Sarah said simply, it would. They worked through the night, carefully modifying the medical bay's emergency communication system. Doctor's knowledge of technology, combined with Sarah's understanding of quantum communication protocols, proved to be a powerful combination. By dawn, they had created a transmission system capable of sending encrypted data across interstellar distances without triggering the facility's security monitors. The modifications were subtle, disguised as routine maintenance upgrades that would escape casual inspection. Sarah's first message was brief but critical intelligence about the invasion timeline, fleet composition, and strategic targets. But more importantly, it contained information about the Empire's internal weaknesses and the possibility of sparking a rebellion among their client species. The transmission would take 3 days to reach Earth, assuming it wasn't intercepted. Sarah could only hope that someone on the other end would understand the implications and act accordingly. Meanwhile, she had work to do. Over the following weeks, Sarah and Doctor began building a network of dissidents within the facility. They were careful, targeting individuals who had shown signs of moral flexibility or personal grievances against the Empire. The human prisoner from her original cell became their first recruit. His 3 years of captivity had given him detailed knowledge of the facility's prisoner management systems and guard rotations. Engineer Third Class, or a young who had been disciplined multiple times for questioning orders, provided access to the facility's maintenance tunnels and power distribution systems. Dr. Ra, and who had been press-ganged into service developing biological weapons, brought expertise in the Empire's most classified research projects. Each recruit expanded their capabilities and added new resources to their growing resistance cell. More importantly, each represented another crack in the Empire's facade of absolute loyalty. The breakthrough came when Dr. Ra revealed the location of the Empire's Strategic Command Center, a heavily fortified installation 3 levels below the arena complex. It was from there that the invasion fleet was being coordinated, and it was there that they might be able to strike a truly devastating blow. The command center is protected by redundant security systems, Dr. Ra explained during one of their clandestine meetings. Genetic locks, psionic barriers, quantum encryption, it's virtually impregnable. Virtually, Sarah repeated, but not completely. There is one weakness, he admitted reluctantly. The command center requires constant updates from field operations to maintain tactical awareness. The data streams flow through the facility's main communication array, which connects to every department including the medical bay. Sarah felt a surge of excitement. So if we could introduce a virus into the data stream. We could potentially gain access to the command center's systems, Doctor finished. But the risk would be enormous if we're detected. Then we die, Sarah said simply. But if we do nothing, billions of people across dozens of worlds will die instead. The preparation took another 2 weeks. They needed to create a computer virus sophisticated enough to penetrate military-grade security systems, design it to look like routine medical data, and find a way to introduce it into the communication stream without triggering any security protocols. Dr. Ra's expertise in biological systems proved crucial. Rather than creating a traditional computer virus, they developed what she called a digital parasite, a program that would mimic the behavior of the biological agents used in the Empire's weapons research. To security scanners, it would look like legitimate research data. But once inside the command center's systems, it would begin replicating and spreading, gradually gaining access to more and more classified information. The night they launched their attack, Sarah found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her to this point. She had volunteered for what was supposed to be a simple intelligence-gathering mission. Instead, she had become the focal point of a rebellion that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. "Are you ready?" Doctor asked, his 4 hands poised over the modified communication array. "Do it," Sarah replied. The virus was transmitted as part of a routine medical supply request, hidden within genetic sequencing data for Dr. Ra's biological research. To any monitoring system, it was exactly the kind of communication that flowed between departments hundreds of times per day. For 3 hours, nothing happened. Sarah began to wonder if their carefully crafted program had been detected and destroyed by the command center's security systems. Then the facility's lights began to flicker. Emergency alarms started wailing throughout the complex as the digital parasite found its target and began its work. On screens throughout the medical bay, they could see the progression of their attack security systems failing, communication networks going offline, command protocols collapsing. "It's working," Dr. Ra breathed, her blue skin glowing with excitement. "We're in." Sarah's fingers flew over the keyboard as she navigated through the command center's compromised systems. Personnel files, operational plans, fleet dispositions, everything was there for the taking. But more importantly, she had found something that could change everything. The Empire's client species weren't as loyal as they appeared. Dozens of worlds were on the verge of rebellion, held in check only by the threat of orbital bombardment. If that threat could be neutralized, if the client species could be convinced that the Empire was vulnerable. "There," Sarah said, pointing to a communication protocol buried deep in the command systems. "That's how they maintain control. Automated threat broadcasts to every client world, reminding them of the consequences of rebellion." "If we could modify those broadcasts," Doctor said slowly, "replace them with evidence of the Empire's weaknesses, we could trigger a galaxy-wide uprising," Sarah finished. They worked frantically as security teams throughout the facility tried to trace the source of the system failures. The digital parasite was buying them time, but eventually they would track the intrusion back to its source. One by one, they began modifying the Empire's automated communications. Propaganda broadcasts became calls for rebellion. Threat assessments were replaced with evidence of military vulnerabilities. Loyalty oaths were corrupted into demands for freedom. Within hours, the modified broadcasts were being transmitted to every world in the Empire. Sarah could imagine the chaos that would follow as planetary governors received contradictory orders and rebel groups gained access to classified intelligence. Sarah called from his position at the door. "We've got company. Security teams are moving toward the medical bay." "How long?" she asked, still working to upload intelligence data to Earth. "Maybe 10 minutes. Sarah looked at her companions, Dr. Ra, and the handful of other rebels who had risked everything for this moment. They had accomplished more than she had dared hope, but their work wasn't finished. "The virus is still spreading," Dr. Ra reported. "It will take time for them to purge it from all their systems." "And the rebellion broadcasts?" "Transmitted to over 300 worlds," Doctor confirmed. "Even if they stop us now, the damage is done." Sarah felt a surge of fierce satisfaction. Whatever happened next, the Empire would never be the same. The facade of invincibility had been shattered, the illusion of absolute control destroyed. Then we've won, she said simply. The security teams breached the medical bay 6 minutes later, finding Sarah and her companions calmly waiting for them. They had destroyed the modified communication equipment and wiped their computer systems, leaving no evidence of their activities beyond the chaos spreading throughout the Empire. Lord arrived within the hour, his usual composure replaced by barely controlled fury. "You," he hissed, pointing one clawed finger at Sarah. "This is your doing." "I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah replied calmly. "I've been recovering from my injuries in the medical bay." "Don't play innocent. Our entire communication network has been compromised. Rebel groups across the Empire are coordinating attacks. Our client species are declaring independence, and it all traces back to modifications made to systems in this facility." Sarah shrugged. "Sounds like you have a security problem." His roar of fury echoed through the medical bay. "Execute them all." "Wait," came a new voice from the doorway. Sarah turned to see a massive entering the medical bay, his scales marked with the intricate patterns that denoted supreme military rank. The other immediately prostrated themselves, including. "Supreme Admiral Eth," said, his voice tight with barely controlled emotions. "I didn't know you were on station." "I arrived an hour ago to investigate the communication failures," the Admiral replied. His voice was calm, controlled, but Sarah could see the intelligence burning in his yellow eyes. "Tell me, Lord, how does a single human prisoner manage to compromise the security of our most secure installation?" "She had help," said quickly, "traitors and dissidents within our own ranks." "Indeed," the Admiral said, his gaze moving from one rebel to another before settling on Sarah. "And what does this suggest about the loyalty of our forces, about the stability of our empire?" Sarah saw an opportunity and took it. "It suggests that your empire is built on fear rather than loyalty, and when people stop being afraid, they start thinking for themselves," the Admiral finished. "Yes, I can see that." He began packing around the group of prisoners, his massive form moving with surprising grace. "Tell me, human, what did you hope to accomplish with this sabotage?" "To save my world," Sarah replied honestly. "To prevent the same atrocities that have been committed against dozens of other species." "And you believe you have succeeded?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Yes, I do." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with those alien eyes. "You may be right," he said finally. The admission sent shock waves through the assembled. His mouth fell open, unable to comprehend what he was hearing. "Sir," he stammered, "what do you mean?" "I mean," the Admiral said calmly, "that this human has accomplished in weeks what our enemies have failed to do in decades. She has demonstrated that the Empire is not invincible, that our control is not absolute, that our people are not unconditionally loyal." He stopped packing and fixed with a cold stare. "She has shown us that we are vulnerable, and in doing so, she may have saved us from a catastrophic strategic error." "Sir, I don't understand." "The invasion of the local sector was predicated on the assumption that we faced weak, disorganized opponents. That assumption has now been proven false. If one human operative can cause this much damage from within our most secure facility, what could a coordinated military response accomplish?" Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Was the Admiral actually considering calling off the invasion? "Furthermore," he continued, "the rebellion she has sparked among our client species reveals deep structural problems within the Empire, problems that must be addressed before we can consider further expansion." "So what are you suggesting?" asked. "I am suggesting that we postpone the invasion indefinitely while we reassess our strategic position. I am suggesting that we focus on consolidating our existing territory rather than attempting to conquer new worlds. And I am suggesting that we need to have a very serious conversation about how we govern our empire." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. Had they actually succeeded in preventing the invasion? "As for our prisoners," the Admiral continued, "they have demonstrated capabilities that could be valuable to the Empire. Perhaps it's time we considered negotiation rather than domination." "Negotiation?" His voice cracked with disbelief. "The old ways are failing, Lord. This human has proven that. We can either adapt to new realities or we can watch our empire crumble around us." He turned back to Sarah. I am prepared to discuss terms for a ceasefire between our species. Your demonstration of human capabilities has been persuasive. Sarah felt a surge of triumph, but she kept her expression neutral. What kind of terms? A non-aggression pact, trade agreements, perhaps even military cooperation against common threats. The galaxy is large enough for both of our civilizations to prosper. It was more than Sarah had dared hope for. Not just the prevention of an invasion, but the possibility of actual peace between humanity and the Empire. I would need to communicate with my superiors, she said carefully. Of course, we will provide secure communication channels for diplomatic contact. As the Admiral made arrangements for her diplomatic status, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had volunteered for a suicide mission to gather intelligence, but had instead become the catalyst for a fundamental change in galactic politics. The Empire was still vast and powerful, but it was no longer monolithic. The cracks that her rebellion had exposed would continue to widen, forcing reforms that could reshape their entire civilization. Earth was safe, at least for now. And perhaps if the negotiations went well, humanity would gain a powerful ally rather than a deadly enemy. But more importantly, dozens of worlds that had lived under the threat of conquest could now hope for freedom. The rebellion that had started in a medical bay on, or was spreading across the galaxy, carried by the Empire's own communication networks. As Sarah was escorted to more comfortable quarters to await the diplomatic negotiations, she allowed herself a small smile. They had thrown a human to their deadliest beast, expecting entertainment. Instead, they had awakened something that would change the galaxy forever. The hunters had become the hunted, and the Empire built on fear was learning what it meant to be afraid. But perhaps most importantly, they were learning that fear was not the only foundation for civilization. Sometimes, strength came from admitting weakness. Sometimes, victory came from accepting defeat. And sometimes, the most powerful thing a warrior could do was choose not to fight. The galaxy was about to discover that humans understood all of these truths very well indeed. 3 months later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic station, established in neutral space between Earth and territory. Through the viewport, she could see ships from a dozen different species, former client worlds of the Empire now participating in the negotiations as independent entities. The rebellion she had sparked had grown beyond anything she had imagined. Half the Empire was in open revolt, and the other half was demanding reforms that would fundamentally change how they governed their territory. Admiral Eth had proven surprisingly progressive, spearheading efforts to transform the Empire from a military dictatorship into something resembling a confederation of allied worlds. It wasn't perfect, and there were still who opposed any change, but progress was being made. Earth had emerged from the crisis stronger than ever, with new allies and advanced technology shared by former imperial subjects grateful for humanity's role in their liberation. And Sarah had returned to active duty with a promotion and decorations that she couldn't wear in public due to the classified nature of her mission. But more importantly, she had the knowledge that billions of people across the galaxy were free because of choices she had made in a moment of crisis. Sometimes the greatest victories came not from destroying your enemies, but from helping them become something better. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, but it was also full of possibilities. And for the first time in decades, those possibilities included hope for a future where different species could coexist in peace. It was a future worth fighting for, and if necessary, it was a future worth dying for. But preferably, it was a future worth living for. Sarah smiled and turned away from the viewport, heading toward another diplomatic session where former enemies would continue the long, difficult work of building something better from the ashes of empire. The war was over before it began. The peace would last as long as people like her were willing to fight for it.